Hi there, we are the Irregulars and my name is Jake. This will be one of our first videos. In this video I will be explaining the basic rules and system of Warhammer role-playing of the 4th edition. An in-depth look into our characters will be given in another of our videos, as we have already started the campaign but decided to start making videos partway through. This will include any dark secrets that a character may have given during the period that was not recorded. Please bear in mind, I am not the GM, also known as Game Master, of this campaign. This title belongs to our good friend Steve. Steve will be giving you all a previously on video, which will probably be called Previously on Prince Magnus's New Champions. So, let's begin and get into the nitty-gritty of the basics of the 4th edition. Let us start with the basics of simple rolls. In this game we will be using a D100 dice, which is a die with the numbers of 1 to 100. In this section we will start with looking at the one-sided roll, which means it is a performance check to see if you pass or fail in what you are trying to do. Let us take one of our finest failures as adventurers as an example: knocking a door down. Now this might seem like an action that you would not roll against, but some doors are more persistent at remaining a door than being knocked off their hinges. To take on a door and knock it down, the GM will tell you that you need to roll against your strength stat. Now if we look at my strength stat, it is at 30. This means that I will need to roll 30 or below to at least pass this roll. A roll of 1 to 5 is an automatic pass, and a roll of 95 to 100 is an automatic failure, no matter how good your stats are. There will be times where a certain success level is needed to pass. Success levels are calculated by the tens unit of the roll. There will be times where a certain success level is needed to pass. Success levels are calculated by the tens unit of the roll. So, for the knocking down of the door, we were given a target of 3 success levels, more commonly seen as SL, which means I would have needed to roll anything below 10. There are times where multiple people can join all their success levels together to complete it. This will be determined by the GM. Opposed rolls are very common, especially during battle, but are not limited to this. To explain opposed rolls the easiest way, I will use sneaking as an example. If you are the one trying to sneak, you will use a roll against the stealth skill. All characters will then need to perform a perception test to see if they notice you or not. The way opposed rolls work is the character that rolled the highest number of success levels succeeds in what they are doing. Now I will talk about rolling during combat. There are 2 ways that combat is initiated. The first and most used is standard combat, where all parties see each other and initiate at the same exact time. The second is when one party ambushes the other. Starting with the basic combat, all characters roll their initiative. This includes opponents played by the GM. To roll initiative, there are 2 ways to do this. You can roll a D100 or D10. This roll will be related to the initiative characteristic. We tend to use the D10 roll, as it is easier to calculate, as it uses the bonus level of the initiative characteristic. This means the tens unit of the characteristic. So, when looking at my initiative, I have an initiative of 27. So I would take the 2 and add it to the dice roll. If I were to roll a 9, I would have a total of 11. This is the only time that we wish for high roll. This will determine which order everyone will attack. Next, I will talk about the ambush way of starting battle. So, upon initiating the ambush, the party that initiates it will gain 1 level advantage. I will explain benefits of advantage later. The party that initiated the ambush get 1 full round of attacks before the opposition can return the attack. Now that we have covered the start of the battle, I will now cover the parts during battle. This includes the advantage I spoke about in the previous section. Advantage is gained for successfully winning an opposed roll, which means both participants roll a d100, though opposed rolls during combat apply to close quarters combat only. Advantage gives the individual a temporary boost in skill performance. This basically means that 10 levels are added to all attack and defense skills per advantage. Advantage can be acquired by both the players and GM character. GM can restrict the maximum amount of advantage available during the combat to make the fights harder and last longer. Now, to acquire the advantage, an opposed roll is performed, and whoever wins the opposed roll either hits, dodges, blocks, or any other potential move they decide on making depending on what they rolled against. The winner of that round gains 1 point advantage, while the opposing character loses all the advantage they had acquired. So, if a character is hit by ranged attacks, they will not have an opposing roll, but any advantage the character being attacked gained will be lost if attack roll is successful. This will also give the attacker 1 level of advantage. Damage is determined using the weapon stats and the difference in success levels. Take an example of if I were to attack an enemy and roll a 32. This gives me 3 success levels as my melee basic is 60. The enemy will also roll as I am using a close quarters attack, which means the opponent has a chance to hit me during my attack phase. This will work both ways when they attack me. So, say the enemy has a melee basic of 26, but rolls a 48. This means that the enemy fell by 2 success levels. We then take these success levels and add them together along with the weapon's damage stats. So, at the end of the roll, I will have caused 12 wounds to the enemy, but if the enemy passed by 1 success level, that would mean that I would have caused 9 wounds as they were able to pass their own melee basic test. Basically, if you visualise the fight, it means that they were able to block my attack but not completely. Deciding on the location of the hit is done by reversing the dice roll and comparing it to the location markers. Next, we will look at how the wounds are taken off and how critical wounds work and how to kill. Starting with taking off wounds, we will take the first damage taken and use it against my max wounds. My max wounds are 14, but the damage of 12 does not come off that instantly. You take your toughness bonus, which is the tens unit of your toughness characteristic, which for me is 4. You then subtract the toughness bonus from the damage. You will end up with the amount that comes off your wounds total. In this case would be 8 wounds, leaving me with 6. If you hit the point where you have 0 wounds left, you do not die instantly. You move into critical wound. These are calculated differently and can cause dangerous effects which will lead to death. For every time a roll is won against a character that has 0 wounds, 1 critical wound will be added, and a roll on a table will be made. To die, a character will need a bleeding condition and an unconscious condition, but battle against an opponent that is unconscious will be stopped. but you can still kill by choosing to slit the throat after all enemy characters are dead or unconscious. If your character gains the total of critical wounds equal to the max wounds, or you gain a condition that can kill you, then you must roll to see if you survive. If you fail it, then you can choose to die or use a fate point to survive. Fortune points can be used at any point a roll is made. There are several ways to use fortune points. The first is if you rolled and failed a test, you can re-roll and hope to get a better roll. The second is you can add one success level to your roll to pass or to have a chance at beating an opposed roll. The last way is to change your standing in a battle for one turn so you can choose to attack first. Fortune points are decided on by the number of fate points unless stated otherwise by skills. These are reset at the start of every game session unless decided otherwise. Resolve is commonly used during battle to prevent critical wounds from causing more damage or to remove one condition. The last option is to become immune to psychology until the next round. Resilience has two very useful traits. The first is to prevent a mutation from occurring. The second is to allow you to choose the roll. This can be chosen before or after you roll the dice, but when spending this point, you will need to explain the enormous feat you have just performed. These points are gained by performing your motivation, but this must be agreed to have been performed with the GM. Critical roll is both a fun and an annoying occurrence. It is this way because it can happen in both failure and success during battle. What defines a critical roll, you may ask? I would reply with a critical roll is when you acquire a double on the roll of a dice. For example, 66 is a critical roll. What will happen if a critical roll happens to be a failure? Well, this will depend on the weapon being used. If it is a ranged or close combat weapon, such as swords or bows, then you will roll on the oops table. I swear this is legitimately what it says. This will determine what will happen if anything serious. But if it was caused by a character that uses magic, well, it's a little more serious as this can cause the character to die, but in turn summon a demon, which will be randomly rolled for or chosen by the GM. Next is what happens when a critical roll is successful. What happens is the character being hit calculates their damage and removes the correct number of wounds. Then a roll is made against a critical damage table, and this can be very dangerous for that character. Corruption points is last, but certainly not to be taken lightly. The way you acquire these can vary and can be decided by the GM depending on your actions or enemies you choose to fight. You can also gain corruption points by praying to the gods of chaos for a reroll. The GM will try and entice you as a player to pray to the gods of chaos at any chance they have when a fortune point did not work. There is a maximum number of corruption points you can take before acquiring a mutation. This is decided by using your willpower bonus and your toughness bonus. Once you have acquired your maximum corruption points +1, you have to roll on a table to figure out what mutation you will get. After you gain a mutation, your corruption points will be reset to 0 again. But beware, because if you have a visible mutation, then you have a high chance of being hunted and killed during your adventures, even by your own party members. There is a way to remove corruption points, but this can only be decided by the GM, as he effectively acts as the gods of chaos. This will not be a good deed either. An example of this from our last campaign, we had a dwarf and an elf in the party, and the dwarf needed to get rid of some corruption points. So, when we were traversing the sewers, He was beseeched by the gods in a private chat. We had come across a section where it was slippery and had to roll to see if we fell in the ship water or not. The elf did, but the dwarf didn't. The dwarf helped the elf back up, but then proceeds to push them back into the ship water. This cleared a corruption point off his tally. However, the deed does not have to be done, as you, the player, can refuse to do it.